Let's speak now to the Managing Director of the Road Haulage Association, Rod McKenzie. Morning, Rod. How are things looking this morning? Any improvement?
Well, no improvement that we've heard so far. Clearly, those drivers have spent a second night parked up somewhere, possibly on the motorway, possibly somewhere else, trying to get across the channel. And many of them are European drivers trying to get home for Christmas, and their morale is very poor. Yesterday, Kent County Council offered each of them one cereal bar, which is a pretty poor effort, I think, in terms of maintaining their morale and their spirits.
There's been some confusion about how many lorries are waiting to get across in Kent, isn't there? Grant Shapps was saying last night about 170. Then the government was saying last night it's closer to 1,000. What's your estimate of how many trucks are waiting to cross the channel at Dover?
Well, the Grant Shapps estimate is clearly wrong, and the figure is closer to around 1,000. It's hard to tell because you can count the trucks parked up on the M20, but you can't count the trucks that are parked up on surrounding roads and towns and so on and so forth. So I would estimate around 1,000, but bear in mind that, to be fair, that is a lot less than we'd normally see because Dover-Calais handles 10,000 trucks a day at this time of year.
We're hoping to get some sort of clarity from Paris later today about what the French want, some sort of agreement possibly with the British government which would allow things to start flowing again. They're talking about testing drivers and getting a negative test before they head across the channel. Is that practical, do you think?
Well, it's not very practical, is it? Because we know that the state-of-the-art tests take quite a bit of time to come back. The very quick tests are often reckoned to be unreliable, certainly in the case of asymptomatic. So it's not easy. And these are not, as I say, mainly British-based lorry drivers who might have a connection with the NHS, for example. They are European drivers. And one of the illogical things about all this is drivers are lone workers. They are in a cab on their own. They sleep on their own. They eat their food on their own. So they're not incredible vectors of disease. So the French decision looks over the top at the best of times.
But if that's what they're demanding, the French, to get things going, how confident are you that the British government can get that infrastructure, that testing organisation happening on the ground to get things flowing in, say, the next 24 hours?
Well, not confident is the answer. I mean, this is a very complex procedure. And if you think about the whole setup of the place with trucks parked end to end down a motorway, that's not going to make it easy for health staff, for example, to wander along and check everyone and get the results back and then find the trucks at the end of all it to release the drivers, as it were. And then there's the whole question of the backlog of ferries and trains and being in the wrong place. So it's a pretty grisly situation.
You're saying about lorry drivers being lone workers, solo workers, so not having much contact. But the fact is they are crisscrossing large areas, going in and out of different tiers. They are meeting people and having to exchange stuff, aren't they? There is still a risk for these guys.
Well, there's a risk for everyone, but if you're looking at a scale of risk, lorry drivers are pretty low. In the last wave of COVID, we had a 2 to 3% sickness rate among lorry drivers. That's one of the lowest sickness rates per occupation of COVID. And if you understand what a lorry driver does, even when they arrive at a distribution centre or a drop-off, they're not really interacting with people on a scale as you do if you're an airline passenger getting on board a busy plane or a rail passenger getting on board a busy carriage.
Rod, you were saying that they're used to living in their cabs. I suppose that means that they're used to the conditions in one way that they're having to deal with at the moment. But you were talking about toilets and food. What are they saying to you? Just give me some examples of calls you've had, of actual stories of people like Colin and Dave that we heard from earlier.
Well, toilets is a big issue for lorry drivers, and the government has been building so-called lorry parks in anticipation of a no-deal Brexit and delays at the border. And we still have big concerns over toilet facilities. Obviously, one of the whole points about the COVID crisis is that we should be washing our hands. I'm not convinced that there are facilities to do that either. So there are major question marks over health, cleanliness, and what provision is being put in place for these drivers to eat. we are not treating them well as a country. We are not treating lorry drivers well in these very, very difficult conditions that they are in at the moment.